The ark of the Lord was in the country of the Philistines for 7 months. Verse 1 of this chapter tells us. In chapter 5, verse 6, we would have read that the hand of the Lord was heavy upon them of Ashdod, so much so that they sent the ark to another city. Wherever it was sent, the hand of the Lord was against the city with a very great destruction, we read in verse 9 of chapter 5, until finally the Philistines decided to send it back to Israel. We're going to read about this in 1 Samuel chapter 6, verses 7, 8 and 12. Now therefore make a new cart, and take 2 milch kine in which there hath come no yoke, and tie the kine to the cart, and bring their calves home from them. And take the ark of the Lord, and lay it upon the cart, and put the jewels of gold which ye return him for a trespass offering in a coffer by the side thereof, and send it away that it may go. And the kine took the straight way to the way of Beth-shemesh, and went along the highway, lowing as they went, and turned not aside to the right hand or to the left. And the lords of the Philistines went after them unto the border of Beth-shemesh. The Philistines had taken the ark, but they were quickly to discover that they could not keep it. Not only was their idol destroyed, but the people themselves were afflicted with what are called emerods in chapter 5, verse 9. These seemed to be like boils or ulcers. And their fields were overrun with mice. We read that in verse 5 of this chapter. Their priests suggested that the ark be returned with a trespass offering, 5 golden emerods and 5 golden mice, according to the number of the lords of the Philistines in verse 4 of chapter 6. But the Philistines were actually wily characters, and they wanted to be sure that Jehovah really had visited this destruction upon them. They decided to send the ark back on a cart which was drawn by 2 milch kine, that is 2 cows that had just given birth to calves which were taking milk from their mothers. The plan was to tie the kine to the cart and bring their calves home from them, verse 7. They reckoned that if the cows took the ark back to Israel, then he, that is Jehovah, hath done us this great evil, verse 9. But if it didn't, and the call of nature made the cows turn back to their calves, they would know that it was just a coincidence that it happened. But as verse 12 tells us, the kine took the straight way to the way of Beth-shemesh. This unnatural action of the cows was evidence to them, and indeed to us, that God had been at work in the land of the Philistines. I think this is a wonderful illustration of something much greater. Just as the destruction of the image of Dagon in chapter 5 reminds me of the triumph of the death of Christ, the return of the ark reminds me of the triumph of his resurrection. The natural thing would have been the cows going back to their calves. It was a supernatural hand that took them to the land of Israel. The natural thing following death would have been for the body to stay in the grave, because dead men don't rise. The resurrection of Christ was evidence of God at work. As Paul preached in the book of the Acts, chapter 13, verse 30, it was God who raised him from the dead. Notwithstanding the seeming defeat at Calvary, a hymn reminds us, death cannot keep its prey. Jesus my Saviour, he tore the bars away. Jesus my Lord. Let's rejoice in this lovely illustration, which reminds us of the triumph of the resurrection of Christ, and let us rejoice in that today.